The first lot off the runway is, of course, Heathrow. There are, of course, two schemes, so we have two speakers. John Holland-Kaye, who is the CEO designate of Heathrow Airport, will be speaking for 20 minutes, and he will be followed by Steve Costello, who's the director of Heathrow Hub Runway Innovations, who will be speaking for 15 minutes on the alternative scheme. There won't be a Q&A after that, but those two will stay up on the stage, and once we've had the for and against speakers, which I'll introduce later, we'll have the Q&A. So can I first of all ask you to give a warm welcome to John Holland-Kaye. Thank you.
Thank you. This debate is not about concrete. It's about ambition. It's about what kind of country do we want to leave for our children and for their children. Do we want it to be a leading global economy as we have enjoyed in our generation? Or do we want it to be in the second tier? Do we want a championship economy or do we want a Champions League economy? That is what the airports debate is all about. If we look at where the growth is going to come from, we all care about jobs and growth. The growth is going to come from North America, South America, and China. If we want our economy to grow, we have to be connected directly to those markets. That's the only way we will get growth. Connecting to the mature markets of Europe is not good enough for the kind of economy that we need to have. Not only do we need to be connected to it, we need to be better connected to it than our competitors in France and Germany. Now, if you look at the map of the world, where all that growth is, it's all a long way away. The only way that you can have a regular daily or more than daily service to those markets by air, which is the only way that people and high-value exports can get to those markets, is through a network carrier operating at a hub airport. It's the only business model that has ever been proved to work on a consistent level to deliver that. Any other business model that is hypothesized is no more than a guess. The only proven model is a network carrier operating from a hub airport, pooling together demand, in our case from all over Europe, to fill planes every day to fly to those high-value markets around the world. And we are used to quite a luxury. We are used to being able to fly pretty much anywhere we like in the world because of the connections that we enjoy here at Heathrow. It's an unusual luxury. Most cities in the world you live in, you won't have the choice of destinations on the departures board that you enjoy at Heathrow, or we'll see at Paris or Frankfurt. There are actually only 6 cities in the entire world that have more than 50 long-haul destinations, only 6. Heathrow has over 80. It is the second best connected airport in the entire world. And until recently, we were the market leader. Heathrow actually, in London, is the natural place to be not just one of the world's leading hubs, but to be the world's leading hubs. The reason for that is the strength of the London market. We have a slight advantage over the French and the Germans in that our economy is slightly more polarized towards the southeast, where theirs is more fragmented across their countries, and they're much bigger countries, of course, which means that they don't have the same concentration of demand. They don't have the opportunity that comes from the financial powerhouse of our financial and services sector, of pharmaceuticals, of tech and food and drink that we enjoy here in this country. And it's a huge advantage to us. We are the natural winner among the 3 big European nations in terms of who should have the best hub. And if you actually look at the map of the world, with modern technology, 777s and 787s, the newest planes can fly further, more environmentally, using less fuel, and they can access most of the globe. More than 95% of the world's economy is accessible in a direct flight from Heathrow. More than 95%. Heathrow and London are the natural places to be the leading hub in the world. That is a massive strategic competitive advantage for the UK. There are lots of places we don't get to, of course. If you were to go to Frankfurt or Paris, you would find that there were some names on the destination boards that you can't get to from here. They're the kind of places you ought to be able to get through to from London. If you can get to them from Paris, you must be able to get to them from London, because London has so much of a stronger local market. And yet we can't. If you are a tech developer, you would naturally think you'd want to get to some of the places on this map, Osaka, which is the home of Panasonic, or to San Jose, the home of the Silicon Valley, or to Chongqing in China, which is where most of the world's computer components are made. They're the natural places you want to connect to. You can connect to those from our European competitors, but not directly from Heathrow. And the reason is simply that we have no capacity at Heathrow to connect to those markets. So roll the clock forward 40 years, and you'll find that the places on here, some of which we've never heard of, will be where the world is happening, and our children will not be able to get there. The only way they'll get there is going via Paris or Frankfurt. That is what we are losing out. Until a few years ago, London was the best connected airport in the world at Heathrow. Today we're number 2. We've been overtaken by the French over the last few years. Until this year, we had more international passengers coming through Heathrow than any other airport in the world. This year, overtaken by Dubai. We are in a global race, and we are losing because of the lack of connectivity at Heathrow. And it's not just London that is losing out. The rest of the UK is losing out as well. There are more cities in the UK which fly into Amsterdam than fly into London, to the hub. We're better connected regionally to our competing countries than we are to our own hub. That means that we're not only exporting carbon, because you fly more if you're going that way, we are exporting jobs as well. We are undermining our own economy and supporting their economies in doing so. If we want to spread the benefits of global growth across the UK, we need better air connections into our hub airport. And not having that capacity at our hub airport means that we're having the same effect to our regions through cutting off air links as we had by cutting off regional links in the beaching changes. This is something we need to fix if we're to spread the benefits of global growth right across the UK. So I think we have two choices, two plausible choices. Do we build on the strength of Heathrow, or do we move the airport somewhere else out towards the east? Those are the only two choices. Expanding at Gatwick answers an entirely different question. Gatwick is a leisure market. It is connecting us to Europe. Europe is not where the growth is for the next 40 years. The growth is in long-haul markets, and that's where we need to be connected to. Now, it's easy to think about just moving an airport. You just build a hub over to the east, and you move the business, and everything is fine and dandy. Of course, it's challenging. We'll no doubt talk about it later. There's all the infrastructure that needs to go in. You need to build a city the size of Milton Keynes to support the workers. A lot of the people from Heathrow won't be able to move out there. They're not the high-paid jobs that would allow people to commute. It would be massively disruptive, not just for the local people, but also for the local economy. 10% of Britain's economy is in the Western Wedge that depends upon access to Heathrow. 200 of our top 300 companies have based themselves within easy access of Heathrow. Not an accident. They're there because they need to access their global markets. The reality of moving our hub from Heathrow to somewhere else is at least 15 years of uncertainty, at least 15 years of Heathrow in decline, because we won't be investing in an asset that isn't going to be there longer term. But even after that, there is no magic wand that will suddenly turn Heathrow into a garden city. And if you want evidence of that, look at Hong Kong Airport, prime downtown real estate that hasn't been touched since it was closed back in the late 1980s. And look at this, Battersea Power Station. When I first moved to London 30 years ago, it looked exactly like this. 30 years later, a prime piece of real estate close to Westminster still looks like this. We don't do these things very quickly. And actually, very few people do them very quickly. So what we're really talking about moving the hub is consigning businesses and people in West London to at least 15 years of uncertainty, and a whole generation of people who will be losing their jobs and their livelihoods as a result of this change to a terrible situation until we get this back on its feet. An entire generation would be affected. That's exactly what happened when the docks closed. It is what would happen to West London if Heathrow were to close. So to me, that's not the right answer, not just as a Heathrow person, but as somebody who cares about the future of this economy. There has to be a better way, and the better way is to see how we can best use the national asset that we have here at Heathrow. It is one of the world's great airports. It is a fantastic opportunity for us. We all enjoy it. Many of us live in and around London, and we get the benefit of the connectivity that comes with Heathrow. But talk to anyone around the world, they have heard of it. They know how good it is. Terminal 5, the best airport terminal in the world, voted by passengers the last 3 years running. Earlier this week, Her Majesty the Queen opened its little sister in Terminal 2. That is the future of Heathrow, demolishing the old airport built in the 1950s and replacing it with those two beautiful terminals, fantastic passenger experience, a world-class airport for the UK. And it's something we can do within our environmental targets. The Climate Change Commission acknowledges that aviation, particularly long-haul flying, is a high-value use of carbon, and we can expand Heathrow within our binding carbon targets. But also, of course, from a noise point of view, Heathrow is getting quieter. It's been getting quieter for the last 40 years. It is actually quieter today than it was 40 years ago, when it was a much smaller airport, of course, because the plane technology is changing. Over the next 30 or 40 years, it will continue to get quieter as the old planes are phased out and new planes come in and new generations of aviation start to come in. And we can reinvest some of that improvement in expanding the airport and giving us the economic benefits that we need. And it's not just about quieter planes, it's about better ways of landing planes. It's about removing the stacking over West London so that we can get planes landing more quickly, reducing noise and reducing emissions. And if we get the transportation right, as we are doing, we can do it without more cars on the road. And that's because public transport is changing. Crossrail is transformational, connecting the west of London with the east of London. It'll be here in 2018, 2019. Heathrow will be connected right the way through the centre of London. But the reason we have so many cars on the road is not because we're not well connected into central London. We will have Crossrail, Heathrow Express and Connect, or we'll replace Connect, and the Piccadilly line. What we're missing is for anyone coming from the north, south or west being able to get by public transport into our hub airport. And that is changing. High Speed 2, Western Rail access to Heathrow, Southern Rail access to Heathrow will connect the rest of the UK by public transport directly into our nation's hub. So if you're living in Slough, this is a huge improvement compared to the current situation. Or Reading, anywhere points west, this allows you to get by public transport into the airport, and it means that we can have no more cars on the road as a result of Heathrow expansion than we have today. What about jobs? Well, there's over 100,000 new jobs that would be created by airport expansion. A lot of them would be local jobs. We have relatively low levels of employment around Heathrow. We're actually the biggest employer locally. We employ nearly a quarter of all those people in jobs. This is a massive opportunity to improve the quality of life for people locally by finding them a job. And that's not just around Heathrow, it's across all of London, and it spreads across the whole of the UK as well. And this is where Crossrail is interesting. If you look at the London plan and the areas where we're looking for regeneration, you'll see that Crossrail connects us to all of them. If I were to ask you, which of the proposals is closest to Stratford? Heathrow, Gatwick, or the Thames Estuary? What would you guess? You'd probably guess the Thames Estuary because it's out to the east. Heathrow is closer to Stratford than any of the other two options. And with Crossrail, it'll be connected to Heathrow directly, Stratford to Heathrow in 42 minutes. That is commuting distance. It's commuting distance for people who want to work there, but more significantly, it is commuting distance for people who want to set up businesses on the back of the fantastic infrastructure that is going into the Lee Valley and around the Stratford area, and also going into Old Oak Common and the other regeneration areas, who can set up businesses there and access global markets directly from Heathrow very quickly. An airport to the west of London is the best opportunity for regenerating the east of London, which is where the London plan takes us. And what about all those jobs? Well, and what about the houses for them? There's over 100,000 people underemployed today within 30 minutes of Heathrow. People who are living there today who don't have a job, who ought to have one. That's just to get up to the target of 74% employment that the government has set. There is massive opportunity here to improve the quality of life for our local communities. And things have changed since 2010. We have a much better plan than we had then. And it's better because we have listened to our local communities. We've listened to them about the importance of respite, we've listened to them about the importance of noise, we've listened to some of the local issues they have around flooding, around local road congestion, about schools. And our new proposal takes those into account. We have moved the runway further to the west, so it moves it away from some of the more built-up areas of West London. It's better aligned with the M4, so that becomes more in line with the approach road. But we'd also be changing the landing thresholds, the landing points on the runways, for all of our runways while we're doing this change, which would mean that even for the existing flight paths, planes would be flying higher over London as they come in. That's a benefit for people under the existing flight paths that we can deliver while we're making so much change around the airport. We also listened to businesses who said, Heathrow is so important for us getting our products to our global markets. Something like 2/3 of all of our aviation exports go through Heathrow. It is a massive cargo hub that we can't ignore, and it's going in the belly of passenger planes. So a hugely important part of our global trade is going under your feet while you're flying to South America or China. And we need to make sure that that is fit for purpose for a growing economy. So we're looking to invest more in our cargo facilities. But when you look at this, a £16 billion investment, private sector investment, all funded by our shareholders in expanding the airport, something that we have delivered, as you'll have seen, with Terminal 5, the rebuilding of Heathrow and Terminal 2, very similar scale delivery. We've done all that before. We know we can do it, and we know we can do it well. It's also an opportunity to fix some things. Heathrow has never been master planned. It's grown up organically, and it's grown up as a big splodge in the middle of our communities. And they are our communities. A quarter of the people who work locally work here at Heathrow, and the children who are being taught in the schools affected by noise are the children of the people who work at Heathrow, and they're the children who will be working at Heathrow in 10 years' time. We have an interest in making sure that we can do the best that we can for them, and we can do more for them in an expanded Heathrow than we can in a static Heathrow. We can do more for local road congestions in an expanded Heathrow than a congested Heathrow. We can do more for flooding. While we are changing so much around here, we can fix a lot of local problems, and we want to listen to the local community and see where we can best make our investment. One thing we've listened to people about is that we need to be fair if we are going to be buying and demolishing somebody's house. So the proposal that we have put forward is to pay 25% more than the unblighted market price for people's homes. That is, to us, a fair compensation for the loss of housing that goes with it. We also want to work with local communities to see how we can improve communities thereafter. And we're talking at the moment about how we can best invest a significant fund of money in noise insulation locally. This is almost 3 times as much as we were proposing to spend with the previous third runway proposal. So there's a significant increase in our commitment to do right by the local community. So I said that Britain faces a choice, and that this is about ambition. What kind of country do we want to have? And some of you will have heard the story before, but my daughter is 13 and has just made her GCSE choices. Her choices, she had to choose between Mandarin and French, and she chose Mandarin, which to me is an extraordinarily complicated language, but to her, the choice was obvious. She knows that Mandarin will take her further in her lifetime than French will. It's a similar choice to the one that we face. Do we want to be a championship nation or a Champions League nation? That is the choice that we're making. Do we want to be at the heart of the global economy, or do we want to be on the branch line to Paris? That is the choice that we are making. Do we want to build on the strength that we have at Heathrow, one of the world's great airports, a huge national asset, giving jobs and growth and hope and ambition to the local people who will be able to benefit from that, connecting all of the UK to global growth? Or do we want to blow our inheritance? Only Heathrow can quickly, privately financed, within our carbon targets, deliver all of that global growth to all of the UK. Thank you.
Steve Costello, here we are. Give him a big hand. He's going to talk about a far better plan for Heathrow than the Chief Executive's got.
So I'm going to try and focus on land being the subject, but just very briefly, our proposal is for an extension of third runway at Heathrow, but in line with the existing. So this is T5, this is the new T2, and this was really driven by our belief that you can't really build a new runway and expose new people to aircraft noise. What I'd like to do is focus on land, because not only is it the subject of today, but it's actually, we think, crucial to the whole debate, because it's too easy to get hung up on aeroplanes and railways. What we're talking about is land and economy. So what I want to talk about is how we can learn from the way in which Heathrow succeeded because of an integrated approach to this 70 years ago. Why we support Heathrow in believing that it's the obvious choice, the only choice for the UK. And then a little bit about why, if it's so obvious, why has it been so difficult? This is a longer debate than it's taken us to wrestle with Europe. And finally, why we think we have the answer. Just to say briefly, there's probably a little bit too much detail in this, but I hope when you get the delegate packs afterwards, you'll find it interesting. So the UK actually led the world, really, in this kind of integrated approach to spatial planning, economic planning, and transport. The Ebenezer Howard Garden City movement, we will talk about garden cities now, it's a little bit glib, but it was incredibly altruistic and very far-reaching. And then the commercial development of that was Metroland. There were three key decisions made, actually, while we were still at war. One was the London Regional Reconstruction Committee, which said, after looking at an awful lot of sites, that somewhere to the west of London was the right place because that is where the markets were. And of course, remember, this was a world long before the global economy. We were fighting a global war. Secondly, the very influential Abercrombie report, which I think puts today's regional planning to shame, actually. And actually, regional planning in the UK has become a dirty word. We've scrapped regional development strategies, which makes something like an airport decision all the harder. And you can see, perhaps just as an aside, when we're talking about the Thames Estuary or great schemes for infrastructure, just how long it can take, because Abercrombie said, yes, Heathrow, but subject to three conditions. And yet it took till 1965, 77, and 98 to deliver the infrastructure that he always envisaged. And that, of course, is the site that was built. And again, very far-sighted. They tried to secure much more land than they needed. And of course, over the years, we've foolishly frittered that away. So we think the result of all that is actually still incredibly relevant today, because you have an airport that succeeds, it drives more air routes, it attracts business around it. In turn, it's attracting business with a high propensity to fly. That fills the planes, so airlines put on more aircraft. And this is nowadays, especially a pure private sector operation. Airlines can move their fleet anywhere, and investors can move their money anywhere. So, what we've developed is something incredibly valuable. And it makes me incredibly nervous to think that we sort of go off at tangents and think, well, it's easy, we'll just do something different. And that synergy is actually replicated all over the world. Schiphol did a very interesting piece of work mapping commercial floor space directly to air transport movements. They got as far as just the turn of the century, then there were caps. But there's an exact correlation, and you can see that at Zurich and at Munich and at Frankfurt and so on. But actually at Heathrow, we've got something more valuable. I mean, it isn't an airport city in the conventional sense of the word in European terms. It's an economic engine for quite a lot of the UK. And I won't go over the figures because John's and Heathrow have done an awful lot of work on this. But these are potentially businesses that are quite footloose. I mean, you can see how Amazon and Pfizer, their decisions are not based on altruism or national interests. It's where they can get a lower tax base, lower cost base. But for businesses that need to fly, Heathrow's proved its worth. And that's all about catchment. So, to run this through very quickly, say the government next year made a decision to go with the estuary. We think that what would start to happen is that in this long interregnum, which I think Daniel Moylan said was 10 years, we think is, it's as long as a piece of string, isn't it? We have no idea. But what will happen to businesses that have located to be near Heathrow when investment starts to dry up in Heathrow? They're not going to say, well, you know what, we'll start planning to buy a bit of land now, and we, Glaxo, or we, BP, will build a new headquarters that will be open exactly the day that the airport opens, and we'll move all our stuff over. I mean, it's frankly absurd. So what we think happens is that you get this gradual shrinkage. And of course, it's made worse by the mountain of geography here. We've got a capital city, this growing capital city, with, yes, Crossrail, but not a heck of a lot more, and a government that's actually scrapped an HS2, HS1 link. How do you get this great weight of people across this great city in the numbers that we're talking about it, and quickly enough, and in an attractive enough and affordable enough way to make it competitive in the world? So we think that you just see a shrinkage in the West, and you get a little bit springing up around an airport. But the real fear is that by the time you open a new airport, actually the market that has driven the demand for aviation doesn't exist. If you're BP and you're Glaxo, you're not going to sit around and wait. these are businesses that depend on being able to get people around the world quickly and efficiently. So you've got a combination of a very high cost airport, very high user charges, a lot of doubt about it, and already, a very poor catchment and probably a much worse one by the time it opened. And this is hurting us now. Slough Borough Council have found there's a reluctance among inward investors to commit, and you can't really blame them. And Maplin is relevant because, of course, we went through this debate 40 years ago. And the key phrase, I think, is in the red. It's no use building an airport if it meets all these tests of perceived environmental benefit if you can't get anybody to go there. Gatwick, next. You can see it's politically attractive, but again, it has never been able to generate the attractive business environment around it that has grown its catchment. And in fact, one of the airport's justifications is to say, well, actually, it's quite easy to build a new runway because it's green fields. Well, I think that almost proves that it has never created this magnet effect of Heathrow. And of course, as soon as airlines get the chance that have tried to see long-haul routes or networks, they've moved. BA for years tried to operate as a dual hub. And I think similarly, Heathrow will stay, obviously with Gatwick, but you will get a weakening because when businesses can go anywhere, they want to be near somewhere which is improving their connectivity, not just a steady state. And actually, a steady state, if I can just talk briefly about the sort of better, not bigger Heathrow idea, it's a little bit of a misnomer, I think, because in this world there is no steady state, but also airlines will increasingly just sweat their slots. They'll put on bigger aircraft, which will make more noise, and our regional connectivity will decline even further. Heathrow would still have this great pull with Gatwick. And of course, the other danger with Gatwick is it costs quite a lot of money relative to their current asset base to develop this. So their user charges would increase. And user charges, infrastructure charges, are a huge component for low-cost carriers, the very people that Gatwick are saying will form this new world. And there is a general consensus, I think, that this new magic world of low-cost, long-haul, point-to-point is actually highly unlikely. But even if it did happen, we shouldn't be betting the farm, the UK, on a very uncertain future, because you could do that at Heathrow. If you got more capacity and the user charge is affordable, airlines would go to Heathrow. So there's a danger. The opposite of the virtuous cycle is this sort of spiral of decline. And I'd suggest that's actually more our place in the world is more fragile than we think. You'll all have seen things like this, but this is the way the global centre of economic gravity is moving. I think it started off down here in AD 1 or something. But it is heading east, and the patterns of connectivity are changing, and of course, as Heathrow say, we have to address that. So if we can develop Heathrow, then what we first of all do is strengthen what we have, this fantastic economic asset that we toy with at our peril. And we would argue that it's not just about the immediate vicinity, it's all of these other places. But what we can do, because core to our scheme, I have to say, although we agree with Heathrow a lot, we do think our surface access proposals are better because it's not trying to put dedicated airport services onto an already congested rail network. It's about, I can say this because I didn't do it, it's quite a cunning approach to maximising the use of infrastructure. So you can start to spread the growth, so you're not overheating the local economy and strengthen what we already have. And this is some work that our master planners from Zurich and Rotterdam have done about, at the moment, the existing development puts a lot of pressure on this very congested area. We don't pretend that it hasn't got challenges, but by putting these arteries through, we can extend the effect of this economic engine far beyond the current situation. To the point where actually we need a regional spatial strategy. We have the Golden Triangle, the London, Oxford, Cambridge triangle, the greatest concentration of knowledge workers in the world. And yet you can't get from Oxford to Cambridge. The government have belatedly sort of recognised East-West rail. It needs to go right round, it needs to be integrated with high-speed rail. But also this Silicon Arc coming down to the Thames Valley, the Western Wedge, the Western Corridor, the M3 corridor. All of these things we can't plan in isolation through LEPs and so on. You need an overarching vision. And we would also say that Heathrow, part of the problem, why has it been such a toxic debate? I think part of the problem is it's seen as a London issue, and partly because the transport corridors at the moment feed London. So if you can extend these corridors through to serve much more of the country, first of all, you're improving access to Heathrow. Secondly, you're extending the benefits. But also, more crucially, I think, you're changing investor perceptions of the UK, because if you get off a train in Europe, we'll come on to this, but you can get to much more of the country. So this is also about taking a much wider view of the assisted areas, places like the southwest, South Wales, some of Europe's most deprived areas, and really in need of all the help they can get. So plugging them into arteries and getting them more accessible, because I think the Airports Commission have got it, and certainly Philip Hammond, the Coalition's first Secretary of State, got it. It's about, you land at an airport like Frankfurt or Charles de Gaulle or Zurich, you look at the train departure board, you can get to all over the country, all over Europe actually. You know, that's what needs to happen at Heathrow, and that's what's driving our surface access proposals. So that's our scheme. It's substantially cheaper, we think, than anybody else's. It is entirely either privately fundable, or the rail improvements are cost neutral because it's redirecting committed funding in a more intelligent way, provides certainty, etc. It has a very small land take. This is the interchange, the Heathrow Hub interchange on the Great Western Main Line and Crossrail. It is all plugged in along a sort of central spine, so ultimately we would see some processing. You could check in there and go straight to your satellite, and then this spine through here. We see T4 coming out because it's challenging to serve these small isolated terminals. And the surface access means that we're dispersing the highways. So you're coming in A4, M4 spur, a new reconfigured junction 13 into the hub here, relieving the big pinch point on the network, which is the M4, M25 junction. It is not correct to say that we would be closing the M25. This is built offline in the same way as road schemes are built all over the UK and the world, and then it would just be switched over one night. And the Piccadilly line would also go up to Heathrow Hub, so that you're creating these pipelines. Environmental, and just to wrap up, there's a reason why Heathrow is a success, and we're very lucky that those people back in the 40s had such vision. And the strength of that vision is shown by the fact that it has stayed intact and stayed successful through all of the changes, the absolutely unforeseen changes since then. It needs an integrated approach to surface access, noise, air quality, and economics, and we think the Airport Commission are actually doing a fantastic job. And we hope that the end result of all this is that, I have to say, our scheme is so compelling that actually the political decision is made quite easy. Thank you very much.
Two more pro-Heathrow speakers now, and then you'll get the opposite view a little later on. We've got Councillor Robert Anderson, who's the leader of Slough Borough Council, who's going to speak for 3 minutes before I start waving that stopwatch at him. And then Alok Sharma, who's the MP for Reading West, who will also do the same. So can you first of all give a welcome to Robert Anderson. Robert.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's quite appropriate that as leader of Slough Borough Council, speaking at a conference considering the impact of Heathrow expansion on land. We know that businesses in Slough are already calculating the cost of relocation, but it's not the cost of relocation to Gravesend or the Isle of Grain. It's to Europe and it's to Asia. And that's why for Slough, despite the negatives that we know the airport brings, supporting a thriving Heathrow is the pragmatic choice for us. And not only for us, but as you've heard in some of the other instances already, for UK PLC as well. Now, the containment of Slough in restrictive local government boundaries has left what we are, which is a pro-growth authority, with very little remaining developable land in our borough. We have to contend with what I would categorise as anti-growth authorities, not far from us, that threaten to strangle that golden goose of economic development that we have in the Thames Valley by their somewhat recalcitrant attitude. Slough's answered this by intensifying our development. We've got a huge number of regeneration and reuse projects on the go to make sure that we stay ahead of the game and we still are attractive to international business. But the town is now full. And we are working harder and harder to get the same result for what we want to out of our assets and out of our land. And expansion of Heathrow, we are in no doubt, will be a game changer for Slough, and it will bring new costs of its own. For the area of Slough closest to Heathrow, you can see from the maps and from the proposals that roads will need to be diverted, houses stand to be lost, business must relocate somewhere. The Heathrow hub proposal would take out valuable commercial space for us. Now that for us as a local authority means the loss of business rates, and given the coalition's way of funding local councils now, we are now dependent on things like business rates to provide our services that we do as a local authority. So while the third runway would require demolition of also our waste processing site, which many of you may know from the M25, it's used by a number of authorities in our area. So that would need to be relocated. But all these negatives are the reasons why we need to be positive about the future of Heathrow, to make sure that there is a growth opportunity here, to make sure there is, as somebody said, a proper master plan going forward, and that we return to some of those values that we had in the past about how to plan regionally and spatially to get the results that we actually want to see. Because the overcrowding around Heathrow, I often hear people say, oh, but it's terrible they built the airport there in the wrong place near all those people. No, the airport came first in a lot of instances. The people followed the airport. They followed the jobs. And it's no coincidence. And like the previous speaker, I often take exception to people who say that it was built in the wrong place. It's a terrible thing that people have of looking back in history and thinking people in the past were more stupid just because we're more technologically advanced. They weren't. Okay. They weren't. They had a good idea about where they wanted to build, and they built things in the right place. As I said, Heathrow is a game changer for us, but it's a game changer whatever happens. It's a game changer if it closes, it would be an economic catastrophe for our region. If it's an economic game changer, it's an economic game changer if it expands because of the issues that we are going to face coming along with it. But it's also a game changer if it stays the same, because we face the prospect of slow decline, of an unattractive vehicle for business investment, and actually the prospect of losing what is the world's premier hub airport, and the ability for us to market ourselves as a region of the world which is going forward and is able to deliver for business, and we don't want to lose that opportunity. Thank you.
Final speaker for Heathrow is Alok Sharma, MP.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. This is a discussion about what is best for Britain, whether we want to go forward or we want to go back. We can't stand still. The one constant in life is change, and that's something that we have to remember. And we're actually already losing. We're already losing to Amsterdam, we're losing to Charles de Gaulle, and if you look over the last few years, there's been almost a 50% increase in the number of passengers from regional airports in the UK going through hub airports in Europe. And why? Because we don't have the hub capacity in the UK. We don't have that at Heathrow, and that means that we're losing out in terms of jobs, we're losing out in terms of investment, and we're losing out in prosperity in this country, and that has to change. John talked about the fact that the Western Wedge represents 49% of GDP in this country. Absolutely, that is the case, and in my own area, in the Thames Valley, 200 of the 500 Fortune 500 companies have their European headquarter or their global headquarters based there. That is not an accident. That is because of the brilliant connectivity that Heathrow brings. And we talk about the fact that it's about what's best for Britain. Heathrow is backed not just by the people on this panel, but it's backed by Chambers of Commerce in South Wales, in Newcastle, in Liverpool, in Inverness, in Glasgow. There is a national mood which wants to see an expansion at Heathrow. And even the Chinese premier, who was here last week, talked about praying for a third runway at Heathrow. Now, the Chinese know all about building runways. They know all about airports. They build 11 a year. And I know they have a different form of government, and I'm not suggesting we have that in this country, although sometimes you wish we could move a bit faster. But actually, just talking about better, not bigger, isn't enough. What we have to talk about is long-term viability. And long-term viability actually means that we need to move forward and expand. And I think the only viable option in terms of hub capacity is Heathrow. Now, I think there is a false argument that is always made about whether it should be Heathrow or Gatwick. They serve two totally different markets. One is a hub airport. One is an airport which is delivering cargo around the world. The other is point to point. I personally believe that actually, if we have the moral courage, what we should be doing is calling for expansion both at Heathrow and at Gatwick. The reality is, by 2030, we're going to be full up in the southeast. And you've seen the number of decades it's taken for us to get to this point. And what I would say is that I hope one of the things that will come out of the Airports Commission is a very clear recommendation. Yes, let's build the first one at Heathrow, but then let's go for Gatwick as well. The final point I want to make is about politicians. We haven't grasped the nettle. Politicians over decades have not really gone forward and actually followed suit. What I hope will happen is that whoever is running this country in 2015 will actually follow through on what the Commission wants, which is expansion of airport capacity in the southeast. I believe the right place for that to start off with is absolutely Heathrow.
Okay, now we've come to the those who think Heathrow is a terrible idea, and the first of those is Councillor Colin Elder.
So, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're nice and wide awake. I'm going to try and rattle through a few issues that are very relevant to us in West London. The first one is, if one of the two options goes ahead, the Northwest new runway, you're going to see about another 50 or 60,000 people overflown. These are people who have bought their houses or live in houses which have never been overflown before. So they're going to have the experience that already, in Hounslow itself, there's probably 50 or 60,000 people who are overflown very closely by aeroplanes, mainly landing over your head, and they land, 300, 400, 500 meters above your house. And I'm one of the people that is overflown. So people in Heston, Osterley, Southall, Brentford, Hammersmith, all of this new generation of people will suddenly have the experience of being woken up very early in the morning and having continuous intensive aircraft noise every 60 or 90 seconds over their heads. Should that be a problem? Well, it's possible to soundproof houses, but sadly, in Heathrow offers the worst mitigation, the worst soundproofing package of any airport in the country, and probably one of the worst in the world of any major airport. That's been the case for a long time. At my own house, I've had the soundproofing package. You get a bit of extra glazing in your bedrooms, and you get a bit of rock wool about so thick in your roof. And that's what you get between you and a 4-engined 747 going over your head at 4:30 in the morning to protect you. It doesn't work. And don't believe anyone if they say aircraft are getting quieter. Certainly when it goes over your bedroom at 4:30 in the morning, any aeroplane on Earth is not quiet. It's a misnomer. An issue that we have, and it's a very important issue, is we have about 30,000 children in education. A lot of them are primary school age, and a lot of those primary school children are overflown. So they're woken up possibly in the morning, the planes go on till 11 at night, but when they're in their classroom, very often they can't hear their teachers, because even though, and I'll give credit to Heathrow, they've soundproofed a lot of the schools. The minute it gets warm, you have to open the windows. There's no sufficient ventilation, so that's a problem. On top of that, because I've only got 30 seconds left, we have a problem of alternation, where you get some respite during the day. I think that one of the plans from Heathrow won't give us alternation. We've talked about night flights. What we haven't talked about is the health impact of all this additional noise and pollution, and how on earth are we going to move forward? We're already breaching EU guidelines on pollution. What are we going to do when it comes to, building another runway? I think the EU Commissioner, who we've already talked to, will not give us the time of day. Thank you very much.
So our final speaker is Mary McLeod. She's the MP for Brentford and Isleworth, if that's how, I've never known how to pronounce Isleworth. She's a banker turned politician, and she spent some time advising the Queen. So perhaps you can tell us a bit about that as well. Elected Brentford MP and Isleworth in May 2010, served as various PPSs for various ministers, and currently the Prime Minister's Small Business Ambassador for London. So give Mary a hand up onto the
I love the fact that the only woman here has the last word in this debate. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I represent 130,000 residents in West London, and I do think people and their lives do matter. So let's just hear from them.
Next summer, the government has a huge decision to make.
Whether or not to build a third runway at Heathrow Airport.
It might not seem like a big deal to most people. For lots of us, it is.
Supporters of airport expansion say we need it to solve the crisis of runway congestion.
But that's just not true, and its impact would be devastating.
Not long ago, David Cameron agreed it was a terrible idea.
He said there will be no third runway at Heathrow. No ifs, no buts. But now he seems less sure. So what's changed?
Nothing. Not for those of us who live under Heathrow's flight paths.
For us, an extended airport would be misery.
Bring in an extra 700 flights a day.
And more flights means more noise.
That's once every 90 seconds, 18 hours a day, every single day.
An expansion at Heathrow would subject thousands more to this misery.
The freedom to live peacefully in our own homes isn't a luxury, it's a right.
But it's not one that Heathrow's big business backers seem to care about.
And for some, an expanded Heathrow would be even more devastating.
One plan would put the third runway right here.
Destroying hundreds of homes and the community that goes with them.
We're not unrealistic. We know that airport capacity is stretched.
All we are saying is that this is about more than just numbers.
It's about people's lives.
And next summer, the government, whoever they may be, should remember that.
725,000 people are affected by Heathrow's noise pollution. The third runway would take that number to almost 1 million, destroying hundreds of homes in the process. But it can be stopped. Say no to a third runway.
Thank you. London is absolutely key for economic growth in this country, and we've heard more passengers fly in and out of London than any other city in the world. And I'm not against economic growth. I spent 20 years in business. I'm not against aviation. I'm in the Royal Air Force. And I'm certainly not against Heathrow because there is economic value to having Heathrow right on my doorstep in West London. But I do want Heathrow to be successful, but I want it to be better, not bigger. So why am I against a bigger Heathrow? First of all, I think it's politically undeliverable. That is why we are where we are right now. The last government said they were for a third runway. This government are saying that they are not for a third runway, and we will continue to have that. So I think it will be, on an ongoing basis, will be politically undeliverable. Secondly, I do believe that we can expand elsewhere. Whether it's Gatwick or Stansted or across the regions, across the United Kingdom. And we want jobs and economic growth everywhere across this country, and there is room for expansion elsewhere. And as Steve said, let's spread the growth. Thirdly, there is an increase in point-to-point travel. 90% of all passenger journeys at the moment are point-to-point. And even Carolyn McCall, the chief exec of EasyJet, looks at the hub operations as a business model of 30 years ago. Fourthly, we do need to look at how it affects people. And you certainly, if you were building an airport from scratch right now, you would probably build it on a coast and not in the centre of a country. And we do not have enough land. So that is why we have to demolish villages and areas in West London to make all of this possible. And that is at a time when we're in a borough in West London that's the 4th fastest growing borough in London, and we don't have enough housing and we need more. And we also want to stop this in terms of noise and health. Every 90 seconds a plane passes overhead and infecting more and more people. And that is greater, the noise that's happening over Heathrow is greater than all other European airports combined. And then we can touch on congestion, where an increase in runway capacity at Heathrow will mean even more congestion in West London. And those of you who travel that way will know it's bad enough right now. But finally, John said at the very beginning that this is about what we leave this country for our children and their children. Well, then let's listen to them in West London. I do believe this is a country where people and their lives do matter, and that is why I'm against a bigger Heathrow.
Thank you very much, Mary, and to the people of around Heathrow as well. They spoke very lucidly. Well, thanks to the brevity of our speakers, we do have 15 minutes, maybe a little bit more if we need it, to debate some of the issues now. And I've got some questions. I want to put 2 or 3 questions to John. Obviously, he's in the hot seat there. And then we'll open it up to the audience. And I'll put them to you together, so you can ignore the last one if you wish, really. I think today, as you may have noticed in the newspaper, Gatwick's boss, Stuart Wingate, said he is now pulled ahead of Heathrow in the race for the next airport, and they've actually turned a profit this year for the first time in a while. If you could comment on that pulling ahead issue, so what do you think of Gatwick? The second one really is related. You sort of suggested that Heathrow would sort of start to wither on the vine if Gatwick got it. Surely not, is the second question. And the third one really is, why doesn't Steve's option work? Can you manage those? Yeah.
It's 3 questions. Let me start with the Gatwick question. I completely support another runway Gatwick, but it is doing a different job. Gatwick is a fabulous airport. We owned it for many years. We loved it very dearly. But Gatwick serves primarily low-cost carriers connecting us with Europe, and it's where we go when we're going on a holiday to the sunny parts of the world. What Gatwick doesn't do is connect us to global business markets. And lots of people have tried to do that. British Airways lost £100 million a year trying to establish a hub at Gatwick and couldn't do it because they don't have the connecting traffic there to be able to create, to support a large number of long-haul connections. Mm-hmm. That's what Heathrow does, that's what Charles de Gaulle does, that's what Frankfurt does. It's an entirely different business model. So we can expand the Gatwick, and it will make us better connected to Europe, but it won't connect us to the global markets that we need to be connected to. Only a hub airport can do that. And if we don't do that at our UK hub airport, we'll effectively be doing it through Paris and Frankfurt instead. That is the reality of airline economics. Airlines make very little money. They trade off a margin of 2 or 3% typically. They lose money in many years. And so it's very difficult for them to put on these long-haul, what they call thin routes, where the demand is relatively limited for flights every day of the year. And that's what we need. All of us traveling on business expect that if we're going to Beijing, there'll be at least 1 flight a day. So if you miss your flight, if you need to extend your stay, there'll be another flight the next day.
Could we have both? The suggestion was made by Alok that both would be fine.
That would be fine by us. We have no issue with expansion at any other airport in the UK, but it will not do for the British economy what expansion of a hub airport can do, which is why it's either Heathrow or a new model such as Thames Estuary are the only 2 serious options for that.
All right.
In terms of your other questions...
It was why your idea is better than Steve's idea.
Well, that's probably for the Davis Commission to decide rather than for me necessarily. There are differences between them. One of them, to our mind, is that the Northwest Third Runway provides alternation to the existing people under the flight path and to new people under the flight path, so that we can always guarantee some times of day when people won't be overflown. Okay. My understanding of Steve's proposal is that's not the case, but Steve may tell me differently. Okay. But the Davis Commission will choose.
Yeah. Was your idea better, Steve?
We started from the point that you can't overfly new people. That was the key. And at the same time, we said it has to come with an integrated environmental policy, so surface transport, air quality, passenger experience, etc. So we can provide some respite. One of the crucial things is, in the noise debate, it's actually the impact of early morning noise, I think, that's particularly crucial. So if you've got the runway further west, as Heathrow have done in their northwest scheme hours, we could allow aircraft to land when there's no departures on the furthest west runway in westerly operations, so they'd be 2.5 miles further west. I think also, though, I mean, my colleague Jock, who has spoken at the other sessions of these conferences where it's been more about noise and environmental, makes the point that there has historically never been the incentives in place to bring together communities, airlines, NATs, CA, and airports. That's the missing piece, because there's an awful lot that could be done.
Okay.
So, for instance, I mean, sorry not to go on, but aircraft come over London at the moment at 4,000 feet from about 18 miles out. There is no reason why they should do that. They put their undercarriage down at different points. There should be control on that. They're supposed to be following continuous descent. They're not. There's a lot that could be done to ease the problem.
Robert, why are you asking your voters to accept more noise around Slough? I mean, do you think they'd vote you back in if they really knew you were saying that?
I think they're pretty clear about that. We've just had an election, which we won quite well. Sorry? On noise? No. Funnily enough, I did point out to somebody just recently that we did have a very highly contested local election, and yet the biggest number of posters which I saw in windows during the election weren't political posters. They were the Back Heathrow posters which have been distributed in the area. And people in my borough really tend to get the idea that they rely on Heathrow and they rely on it for their jobs and their prosperity. And I think this is one of those arguments I think Alok mentioned about politicians failing to grasp the nettle over many years. I used to sit on the Regional Development Agency, one that the current government abolished a few years ago, that did try and do regional planning and spatial planning. And in that time, although we were the South of England Development Agency, we spent, for the 5 years I was on there, from the beginning to the end, we were always talking about Heathrow. It wasn't technically our airport, Gatwick was, but we recognised clearly that Heathrow was the driver for the southeast of England as regards that. And I mentioned the waste plant that we use as the council. We were discussing one of those in one of our meetings, and one of the business members said, well, what we need is you politicians to have a bit more political courage and take some of these decisions. And I said, well, there speaks a man who's never stood for political office in his life. But actually, that was a very good example for us. We did grasp a political nettle on that one, built that waste plant that still sits there at the moment, lost an election on it, on the basis, and now it means that we're one of the most environment-friendly boroughs in the country.
If you look at this very logically, if you want to make sure that Britain stays ahead in what we sort of call the global race, and you look at the figures in terms of aircraft movements and the growth in air travel, we know that on the figures produced by the Department for Transport, we are going to be full up in the southeast by 2030. And if you look at the number of decades it's taken us to get to this point, we need to make a quick decision. We need to have a first runway, and I think Heathrow is that one because it is a hub. But if we wait for another commission in another 20, 30 years, we will be coming back, well, we won't, I suspect we will be, somewhere else, perhaps in an old folks' home or something, but the reality is that we will be coming back here again and having this same old discussion. I think it's better to grasp the nettle now and recognise that we need airport capacity expansion both at Heathrow and Gatwick.
The noise issue is obviously the one that rumbles along, I should say, under all of this. I mean, I'm not sure that the Davis Commission accepts that it's going to be noisier for you, is it? I think it says it's going to be less noisy.
Well, we had them visit the borough of Hounslow about a week ago. We met them and we took them out under the flight path at 6 o'clock in the morning. They were very brave. So they were astonished at how loud the planes were. What astonished them even more is even if the planes are coming from that direction, you get the impression that the noise is coming from that direction because it bounces off walls and so like. So you get this noise coming at you from all different directions.
I understand it at 400 feet, but the mathematics of it apparently prove that it will be less noisy with the new runway.
I can tell you any lies you like with statistics. We're well known for it in politics. Don't believe that aeroplanes are quiet. And funnily enough, the further you get away from Heathrow, you have this inverse law of people complaining. People complain much more loudly in Wandsworth, Richmond, Hammersmith than they do in Hounslow. For better or for worse, we suffer the noise, but we do get some advantages out of it. Some of our houses are soundproof, but once you get away from that sort of magic line of 72 decibels, I mean, nobody gets any soundproofing, and you will not believe how loudly the middle classes in Chiswick, Putney, Wandsworth, etc., scream about the airport noise.
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, of course, I think we recognise that that is a big issue for local people. But as you said, there are also advantages, and that's jobs and prosperity in the area. But in terms of the noise issue, I mean, we have got quieter aircraft. There are quieter operating procedures. The runway location is being moved. You've got noise relief in terms of runway alternation, which can take place, and there is compensation as well, which is being offered under these schemes.
But some of these things don't happen already, so we take noise insulation, it's still not good. So what local residents are cynical over decades of working with Heathrow, and I'm letting John off the hook because he's not done the job yet.
Mary,
but
you and I had a
But it's not, you might say jobs for local people, but actually these other houses are being demolished.
Mary, you and I
these
had
are
a
villages that are being
discussion about
demolished
this.
now, and every decade Heathrow has said, we don't want any further expansion, just give us this bit and nothing more.
Right.
That has happened decade after decade, and that's
Mary,
why I say let's expand
let me
where
come in.
there is
Let me come in, because we had a discussion about this before this event. And what I said to you very clearly is that what does Heathrow need to do to fix this for people? It's never going to be perfect. I understand that. I absolutely understand why you are fighting for your residents. Absolutely, I get that. But I think what you have to do, or those who actually want to try and get a solution, is to say, this is what is required to basically fix it. It's not going to make it sort of 100%, brilliant, but it will be bearable for us. And that's an argument that you have to put forward.
Compensation, Mary? Is 25% not enough, or is it full of?
Well, it's not for me to decide what the compensation should be. I mean, I come up from this fundamentally in that it is politically undeliverable. You can see that. You have a Conservative and Labour politician on both sides of the argument right now. I absolutely think it can't be delivered at Heathrow. So I admire the aspiration, but I don't think it can be delivered politically. That's why we're in this position today. So I say, let's make decisions as politicians and actually build where we actually can deliver
Mary,
it.
let me just say one thing, which is that what you cannot do is stand still.
No, exactly.
Because what you will be doing by not expanding Heathrow is effectively signing a slow death warrant for the local area. That's exactly what will happen. Jobs will go, businesses will relocate.
Absolutely not. It won't happen.
That is not going to be good
My
news
biggest
either for
businesses
your
will stay in West
constituents or
London,
mine.
and I want Heathrow to stay in West London. I mean, it is important for the local economy.
Let's understand the implications of a full Heathrow, which is that we are at capacity now. We can't include any more flights. What will tend to happen is the airlines will have to make increasingly difficult choices about what routes to open up. They will tend to put more planes onto high-value markets such as North America. They will tend not to open up new routes to emerging markets because they're very expensive to develop. It typically takes about 3 years before you even make any profit on a new route. They will tend to close down routes to regional UK markets. So progressively, we will become less connected to the rest of the UK. We'll be cutting off the rest of the UK from global growth. And actually, we'll be cutting ourselves off from some of those emerging economies we badly need to be connected to if we're going to be an economic powerhouse in the future.
But why can't we expand those regional airports?
We can. They have
and
loads
they could
of
be
capacity.
flying direct to China.
They have loads of capacity because they can't. The airlines cannot make money flying directly to places like China from regional airports. They can. Air China can't even make money flying to Gatwick from regional airports.
If you're encouraging investment from China into other parts of the UK where we have skills and people to do the jobs, then I think you can do it.
You talk to the Chinese government and they will say absolutely not.
That's because we sell Heathrow to them all the time.
No, absolutely not. I've tried to sell other airports to them and they will not fly there.
I sell London to them and
they need the feed from the short-haul network to tie into their long-haul flights to make it viable. But there's another thing of if you have a mature market, as Heathrow will be, we will employ fewer people. That is absolutely the case. We employ fewer people today than we did this time last year because mature businesses can only survive by taking out costs, and lower costs means lower jobs. That is the reality of a static Heathrow. There is no...
But my unemployment's going down in my area, so actually what people do when that happens is that they move somewhere else for jobs. I had to come from Scotland to get work in London. So, we do move.
John, just a very quick one from me, and then I will open it to the floor. If they choose Gatwick next May, June, July, wherever they are, what happens then to your CapEx plans for the next 10, 15 years?
Well, it's a good question. We've invested £11 billion rebuilding Heathrow. It is a completely transformed... Anyone flown through Heathrow recently? Most of us fly through Heathrow. It is a transformed airport. And that's the reality. the people that we're talking about who are in those planes that we might complain about overhead are us. We people of the UK who want to connect to our global markets, who want to go to businesses. That is who flies from Heathrow. But we will, I'm sure, spend less rebuilding Heathrow in a world where we don't have expansion than a world where we do. We'll have to make the right economic choices there.
I mean, we do have the 30 million capacity with Terminal 2 opening, so there is capacity right now.
No slots.
No slots.
Planes.
But then you can choose, airlines can choose where they fly, and whether it's getting rid of charter flights from Heathrow.
We don't do charter flights as standard from Heathrow.
There are some.
There
are
some.
Absolutely handful. About expanding regional airports. Yes, of course you need to do that, but there is capacity there now. But I just go back to this point I made when I had my 3 minutes, which is that there has been a 50% increase, actually 49% increase, between 2005 and 2011, there's the latest figures available, of people flying from regional airports in the UK to Frankfurt, to Amsterdam, rather than coming through Heathrow. And that is the reality of it. So the idea that somehow we will develop a whole bunch of mini-hub airports across the country is for the birds.
But the reality is also that it's 90% is point to point.
Politicians should let the floor speak now. People are desperate for their hands
get
up.
a word in with you,
I will.
politicians.
The chap at the back there, I think, is a Heathrow fanatic.
He's back Heathrow.
I am a Heathrow fanatic. Rob Gray, back Heathrow. Interesting to see Mary's film. I urge anyone to watch if they want a rebalanced debate. Our film of some of our 30,000 residents who are pro-Heathrow expansion. That film was entered into a competition recently organised by the Richmond Anti-Heathrow campaign, and herein lies the difficulty. My question's coming. 316,000 Richmond residents flew out of Heathrow in 12 months alone. They want to fly out of it, they love the local airport, but they're campaigning vociferously against it. We want to see a more positive attitude from local politicians, and my question, before my question, finally, it's delight. No, well, Baroness Dean wanted a debate, so let's have a debate from the audience as well as the panel. I'm delighted to see two democratically elected politicians stand up for Heathrow. I think it's the only one of the options today that has two democratically elected politicians standing up for it. My question to Mary is that last week you just said there you want to build at Gatwick. I think last week you tweeted your support for a Thames Estuary airport. Do you still stand by that, and how can you justify that with the loss of thousands of jobs in your constituency?
Yes, I'm supportive of Gatwick expanding. On the Thames Estuary, I've always been very positive about exploring the option, and that's what the Commission are doing. So we will see whether there's something that's viable there or not. I do like the idea of building something the best in the world, but but we'll see what the Commission come back with once they've done a bit more analysis on it. But I also don't. I still think that we can have Heathrow in West London. I've never said I want to get rid of Heathrow at all.
Supported Thames Estuary Airport. You said it was great.
I said the idea is a very interesting one, and but the Commission is going to do some work on it. So let's hear to see how viable it is. I certainly haven't done the analysis to see whether it's cost effective.
Okay, young lady at the back there with the blonde hair.
Friends North Kent Marshes. My question is for Mary. How can you tweet and pursue a Thames Estuary Airport if you don't want Heathrow Airport to close? Because Heathrow Airport will undoubtedly close. You're fighting for your residents, but we have 26,000 people who'd lose their homes on the Hoo Peninsula. That is the biggest mass movement of people since World War II, and it would be an environmental disaster. How can you pursue that?
Well, I think I answered that in the previous question. It was almost an identical question. So I'm not sure I need to go over it again. You've heard it. The Commission will look at the feasibility and the viability of that option, and they'll come back and give us their thoughts on it, we'll do that. But I've always thought that in terms of increased capacity, if I look back at what Heathrow has done decade after decade, they've kept coming back saying we need more capacity and more capacity. So if that's the case, are we going to build a 4th, 5th and 6th runway at Heathrow? If not, then maybe we need to build in addition something new elsewhere.
Okay, any more from the back there? No, there's just, yes, sorry.
Chris Chalk, British Aviation Group. A question for our two elected MPs who may aspire to be in the still MPs after the next election and maybe further up the stream of government. When the Davis Commission reports, will you support it, or will you let it go into the long grass?
I think all politicians are more or less said at the moment. The Commission will present their findings, and then I guess each political party will discuss those findings and decide on their political party view from there. I will always be on the side of my residents, so if my residents, as they are just now, are saying that they do not want any expansion at Heathrow, they want a better Heathrow but not a bigger Heathrow, and the recent surveys that I have done and the Borough Council have done have said that 2/3 are against expansion, so I will stand up for my residents.
So should politicians respect what the Commission comes up with? Yes. Quite short for a politician, isn't it, as an answer? The only thing I would add is that, and I've made my views very clear, which is that I think what we want to see is a recommendation which eventually leads to both Heathrow and Gatwick expansion, and I think that's what makes sense actually for the country.
Okay. I think we've got time for perhaps one last question. Yep. Young lady at the front again.
I gather some industries are required to produce a health impact assessment of their proposals. I've not heard so far of the Airports Commission asking for a health impact assessment, but have you submitted one to the Airports Commission? Have they asked for one? Do you intend to submit one? And if not, why not? And I'd like to know from the other councillors whether they also think there should be a health impact assessment of a Heathrow runway because of the air pollution issues, the noise issues, the stress from, say, being repossessed and compulsory purchased, from blight, a whole range of issues damaging people's health and quality of life.
Thank you. Yeah, so you heard what Ken had to say about that, didn't you?
Honest answer is I don't know. But I would say on health that one of the biggest ways of creating health outcomes is by giving people a job. And that's something that has to be taken into account in balance with the other factors you talked about.
Could I add one thing there? So the stage the Airports Commission are at is that we've provided information on a whole range of what we call modules: air quality, noise, CPO, etc., qualities impact. The Commission will be consulting on that in the autumn, not looking for people to say we prefer this option or that option, but on the methodology. My understanding is that after that it then leads to the sort of work that you've identified. What they're really trying to do, which I think is very commendable, is to come up with as robust a set of data as possible to inform their recommendation. So I think the short answer is yes, all of those issues are within the Commission's remit.
Could I come in?
I think,
yes, two last words. One from you, and then we'll stop.
Yeah. I just think that that's absolutely crucial for us as in terms of where we go with Heathrow in the future in terms of mitigation. Because for us, a lot of the problems that we suffer from in terms of pollution, in terms of problems from the airport are not caused directly by the airport, it's caused by the lack of surface access and people travelling in public cars and the issues around getting to the airport. The previous third runway proposal under the previous government did have some very stringent things attached to it around air quality. And one of John's predecessors once said to me, even if we make the planes fly on fresh air, we can't meet those criteria unless we do something about surface access. So for us, that's an absolute crucial thing, to be able to get to the airport in that. And this thing about us not doing it quickly enough, I used to live and work in Holland nearly 25 years ago. And my office was about 15 minutes from Schiphol Airport by train, which is quite a long way in terms of how good their connection is. I could get the train to Schiphol, get on a flight, be back at Heathrow, 45-minute flight, and then I'd spend an hour in a stack over London waiting to land at Heathrow on a Friday night. That was 25 years ago. That's the problem we've still got in so many areas. We're creating things that are, we're creating problems, and we're trying to solve problems that weren't solved in previous expansions. And Mary mentions just one more thing. That goes back to not properly master planning in the past. We can't go back and change that. What we can do is make sure it's properly addressed in the future.
Colin, last word from you.
In terms of health, our borough is probably the most affected negatively by the presence of Heathrow in about 4 or 5 different ways. You do get very heavy pollution hotspots wherever you get the intersection of roads. We've got the M4, we've got the A4, the A30, we've got the M25. All of those are heavily trafficked, so we get an intensification of NO2 and particulates in particular, plus of course the flights, which are actually less polluting than the sum of all the cars, but that is additional pollution as well. So that's something which is already beyond the targets that it should be, and as I said, I think we'll end up getting fined and we'll end up probably in the European courts because of that. There's also an issue about noise and sleep deprivation. I think there's a recent study by, if I remember rightly, Imperial College about the negative impact of disruption to your sleep. That has an impact on your health. I think generally living in a noisy, stressful environment is detrimental to your health. So there is a cost that we pay. I think it's a cost that's too high to the health of our residents. And that is directly as a cause of Heathrow, with all the traffic that it generates, with the little alternatives to actually getting to Heathrow by car, because it's virtually impossible to get to from half of the country by any other form of transport. That has a direct impact on the health of our residents, and there's certainly people that will die prematurely and have diseases that they wouldn't have otherwise had as a result of being in close proximity to the airport.
Okay, thank you. I wouldn't mind just giving John a last word, seeing it's his airport from July the 1st. Is there anything you'd like to add at the end? I mean, where would you start work if you got the go-ahead in 2016?
Well, the quickest, our assumptions is that it's going to take us 5 years to get through planning and 5 years to get building so that we can get the new capacity on stream. I think that expanding Heathrow is certainly the right thing for the long term of the country. I think we can do it within the environmental concerns, and I think we can do it listening to our local communities and respectful of their concerns. I want to work with our local communities in both a 2-runway world and a 3-runway world to see how we can get the best outcome for all of us. And when I take over next week, that's the first thing that I want to go and look at.
Okay, thank you very much, John, and thank you to the whole panel. We pushed it on for another 15 minutes or so because it's such a big panel and it's such a big airport.